I'm glad to be here. I'm late because I've been at the University of Queensland giving a lecture. I had to give a lecture about sex there to about 150 doctors. I hope this talk will be as interesting. So you missed out, but anyway. I'm very privileged in my work that I learn from the people that I listen to and care for. And I did start working in Bogger Road in 1975. That's a long time ago. We still had the gallows then, and we still had the black hole, and we still had the cages, and we still had the old red brick building that's still there as a museum now. And so some of my patients' names are written on the walls of those buildings. I believe in a two-way learning relationship. I learn from my patients and my patients learn from me, so that's the model I use. It's quite liberating actually, because I get a lot of relief out of accepting that I can't change anyone in the world except myself. And so now I don't even try, and so now I'm never a failure. So I hope you can get that same sense of freedom to just connect with people in ways that are meaningful and fulfilling and based on what I would call love. I know most of you, or some of you, have heard me talk before, and I don't want to double up or repeat what I said, but for the new people I will need to repeat some of the things that I've shared, and then we'll build on that to get some more understanding. Later on I'm happy that we have some interaction where you can share with me things that you understand or you don't understand or that you find, and say, hey, these are the situations we're in, how can we respond to this in the way that's going to have a good outcome? I will warn you that when I talk about being human, and so you might find yourself having feelings about what I'm talking about. Some of them will be relief feelings, some of them might be sad feelings. If that's how you respond, just welcome those feelings, because that means that we're actually being real or being human together. And so I'm not here to pretend, I'm not here to edit, I'm not here to cover things over, I'm just here to be honest about how life really is. I think we all, you better wave to me when, yeah, good. I think we all really want to believe that love is the best way to relate to each other. We even sing songs about it. But sometimes, although we've got this deep longing to have love as the foundation of how we relate, and we might have even some ideas about it, sometimes we think, well, how can it work, or how does it work, or what are the ingredients that make love work? And so today I'd like to untangle love a little bit and break it down and look at what the ingredients are, because just the word in itself might not actually deliver relief for the people we care about. For instance, if I go to jail and say to somebody, God loves you, they're likely to say, oh, who's God and what's love? And so those two words, while it might mean something for me, may mean nothing for them. And if they've never experienced love in their life, or they've never had love defined in a way that makes them feel valuable, or they've had God sold to them in a way that makes them feel bad about themselves rather than valuable, then those words may not be able to deliver relief for those people. And so I'm really grateful in my life that my religion taught me the theory of love, but my work in prison taught me the practicalities of love. Yeah. And so religion taught me that people are valuable, that's nice, and religion taught me that honesty is a good thing, that's nice. But often in my own personal life I lived in fear that if I was honest I'd actually get rejected by my religion. And so it wasn't that they hadn't taught me nice theory, it's just that the reality was sometimes within our family, church families, we might be scared to be honest about our mistakes or about our insecurities or about our past, for fear that we will get judged or get rejected. And so I'd like to translate that theory into practical relief. And when I went to work in prison, I was the organist, and then I became the chaplain, then I became the doctor, and then I ended up being a volunteer doctor. Especially when they said to me, oh, sorry, we can't afford to employ you anymore. And I said, thank you so much for your honesty, I'd be happy to work for nothing. And I had to lobby for 6 weeks then for the right to work for nothing. and And it was quite interesting because I knew they weren't being honest, and they said, oh, what about your insurance? I said, oh, I paid that already, so that's covered. And I said, oh, what about if someone threatens to kill you? I said, oh, that's okay, that's happened 6 times already, and I've made friends with all those people, so, so there's no threat there. And so in the end it turned out that they actually wanted to get rid of me, and they weren't able to be honest, and that's why I said thank you so much for your honesty, because I knew they weren't being honest. And it was interesting because I went to the meeting, and in the meeting I said, if there's a problem, let's talk about it. And the problem was that someone said, oh, well, you speak about issues in the community and you're breaching your contract. I said, I didn't sign any contract. And I said, I don't speak about issues in the community to throw mud. I speak about them because I want the community to own the fact that people in jail are part of us, part of community, not out of sight, out of mind. 200 years ago, we got sent here from England thinking that if you just reject people, you've solved the whole world's problems. Well, it's not true. No, even if you put a wall around someone, they're still a person. And I want our society to own the fact that people in prison are part of us, part of community, and we can't just think that rejection is going to be the best way to solve every problem. And some politicians love to flex their muscle, thinking we'll get tougher and we'll put more people behind walls and we'll solve the whole problem. And it might get them votes, but it actually isn't about restoring the value of the person, or saying, let's be honest, to deal with why this person did what they did. And so I don't like rejection, and I won't participate in denial or hypocrisy or just sacrificing honesty to try and save face or keep a job. Anyway, they said, well, you speak out and we can't. I said, well, I'm sorry, but you're welcome to. And they said, they were a bit jealous of me actually, because people in jail used to come and tell me that they are using drugs. And I used to say, thank you for telling me. That's a real honour that you feel safe to be honest with me. Your honesty is actually going to be the circuit breaker, so we can find better ways for you to feel good than to use drugs to feel good. And so when they told me honestly that they were using drugs, I would respond with acceptance and say thank you. When they told this person that they were using drugs, that person used to tell the manager, and the manager used to then put them in the detention unit, and the person would learn not to tell anybody that they were using drugs, and so we would teach them to be dishonest. And when we teach people to be dishonest, what's going to change other than get worse? Nothing. And so I work on a different model, that I accept people and I welcome honesty, not reject people or punish people because of being honest. And he was a bit jealous that people trusted me to tell me, and so he used to play this silly game where they talked about what they used to do before they came to jail, not what they're doing now in jail. And I said, well, you can pretend and you can play cat and mouse games and you can play punishment, but it doesn't meet anybody's needs. So how do you expect it's going to help anybody? And he also didn't realise that before he got his job, I used to lobby extensively to get alcohol and drug counsellors into the prison. And so my speaking out actually got him his job, and he didn't realise. And so that's why I like to look at big picture. And big picture is, hey, we're all human, we've all got needs, we all do different things. Some things work, some things don't. Some things are through roads, some things are dead-end roads. And who isn't learning? And the fact is, we'll all be learning to the day we die, and that's good. And that doesn't mean I've arrived, and it doesn't mean I'm perfect, but it does mean that I'm human. And so I welcome learning, and I welcome honesty in learning, so we can learn sooner rather than later. Because if we don't be honest, we don't learn, and we repeat what we did, and then we find ourselves doing the same thing again and again and again. That's called denial. And denial is very attractive, because when things are painful, honesty is too scary. But if out of not being free to be honest we go into denial, does it fix it? No. You know, when someone dies, it's painful, and we might want to deny it, but it doesn't mean they're not dead. We need safe places where we can be honest to work through that grief. Or if we've got an addiction problem, if we deny it, we promise not to do it again, deny that using drugs isn't the best way to solve a problem, don't learn from the past, deny it, repeat it. That's a recipe for addiction. And so I've got a little equation that says denial and dependency always go to bed together and have a little baby called addiction. And so you deny your losses and see your gains and use again. And you deny yesterday and don't learn from it and do it again tomorrow. And so denial is always part of addiction. 80 to 90% of people in prison have got addiction issues. either alcohol or drugs, doing things under the influence or doing things to be able to support their addiction. And so most of the people in prison have actually got an addiction issue. If we think that rejecting those people is going to help them feel good, they're going to say, drugs make me feel good, I'd rather have the drugs, thank you. And so if we don't help people meet the needs that cause them to have the bad feelings, and they then think drugs is the only way to feel good, and we push them into denial and we don't nurture their honesty, then there's little likelihood that things will get better. In fact, we could reliably predict that things will get worse. And so I always seek to say, how can I make it safe that this person can afford to be honest with me so they can get better relief out of honesty than they could get relief out of denial? And that missing concept is actually a concept that I call acceptance. Yeah. When we feel accepted, it's a relief to be honest. If we think we're going to get rejected, we're scared to be honest, we do everything but be honest. We lie, we pretend, we take on the hypocrite role, we put other people down to make ourselves look good. We do everything but be honest. And so I'm going to share with you a model. When I feel accepted, then I'm able to open up. And so I'm able to communicate. And if I really feel accepted, I might even feel safe to be honest in my communication. And so for me, acceptance is always a prerequisite for honesty, and I never expect anyone to ever be honest with me unless I make it safe. Some people think, well, if I accept people, then I'm going to compromise my honesty about this is right and that's wrong, or this is good or that's bad. Acceptance doesn't mean I have to compromise anything. Acceptance means that you can be honest and I can be honest, and we can even agree to disagree, or we can say, hey, I understand or I don't understand, or I'm learning and you're learning, or this is what my experience tells me, what does your experience tell you? And so when we accept each other, we can actually learn from each other's life experience, and so we share our own learning experiences. This was a bit of a dead-end road, this was a through road. We can learn from each other. Yeah, you can, David will hand out the models. You can have a cheat because you can go ahead and you can write on them. When I've been honest and somebody still accepts me, then I get to trust. And so I like to think of this as the way to act to get a safe outcome. It's not likely that we get that safe outcome unless those two ingredients work together. Yeah. Remember I said in my religion, I was scared if I was honest I'd get rejected. And so my need for safety meant that I put up a big wall around myself, never letting anybody in, getting an image that made me feel safe. In fact, everyone thought I was too good to be true. And so you can have a goody-goody image. It's very safe and it's very lonely. Because inside that wall you think, wow, what if people find out the truth? What if they see the cracks in my wall? And we can spend our whole life being what Jesus called a whited sepulchre. In other words, white on the outside, rotten on the inside. And it doesn't mean we're bad people, it just means that we're locked in a thing called survival. And I work with my patients to say, I want you to move from surviving to thriving. And in thriving, I feel that I'm valuable and you're valuable, and if we make it safe, I can be honest and you can be honest and we can be honest together. And so with that shared sense of acceptance, and it's okay for me to be honest and okay for you to be honest, we can get some respect, and we can also get some understanding. Over here, when I'm putting my wall up, I can feel very, very safe, but I feel that nobody actually understands me. And you'll actually, if you listen to people, survivors often feel very alone. They often feel that nobody understands them. And if they've had to keep a lid on the secret, or if they've had to put a wall up to never let people close, how could somebody understand them? In my work with people, I just let people know I accept them, and the most efficient way that I can do that is just to listen to somebody. I don't even have to use big words to show you that I accept you. If I just listen to you, you will feel that I'm valuing you because I'm giving you my time, or I'm listening to you without editing you or shutting you up or telling you you're right or you're wrong. And so even if you don't know the answer, if you just listen to people, you're helping them feel valuable. Even little kids are good at that. If little kids feel accepted, they open up. If they don't feel accepted, guess what they do? They shut down and they push you away. Or they might do another thing, that's called they might test you. And they'll nag you, or they'll do the opposite to what you say, or they'll... and they're pretty good at testing. And they're testing. Do you accept me? And so I often say, yes, I do accept you. That's why I'm being honest with you. I do accept you. You can be honest with me and I'll be honest with you. And so acceptance does not sacrifice honesty. It actually gives honesty a chance. And when I feel accepted, I feel free to say yes or no. If I don't feel accepted, we could find ourselves scared to be honest and find ourselves not saying yes or no. We might find ourselves saying yes and yes because we're scared to be honest, and we might say what people want to hear. And so we actually become that hypocrite person who sacrifices honesty trying to get accepted, meanwhile becoming a shell of a person instead of a free person. I work in rape and sexual abuse. I've cared for 1,200 men who've been raped or sexually abused. I've cared for 340 people who've been perpetrators of sexual abuse. In a sexually safe relationship, when we feel accepted, we're able to say yes or no. If we don't feel accepted, we might not feel free to say yes or no. And so in sexual abuse, we don't feel that we've got a choice, and so we don't feel accepted. We don't feel free to say yes or no, and so we actually learn not to trust. And so sexually abused people will actually get safety here through their secret. And they'll put a lid on it. And some of my patients have kept their lid on for 30, 40 and 50 and 60 years. And that's what survivors do. They don't want to be vulnerable again, where people put them down or have power over them or take away their choice. And so they're often good at putting big walls up, never letting anybody close. And so unresolved sexual abuse can present as failure to achieve trust or intimacy or love in your future relationships, because you're locked over here in survival mode, not feeling valuable, not feeling equal, not feeling free to be honest, scared to be honest, learning not to trust anybody. And so when I'm helping somebody recover from sexual abuse, I say to them, hey, you're a great survivor. You've done well on surviving by putting your wall up, but I want relief more than the wall. Because the wall might make you safe, but the wall won't make you free. And when you think about it, no shell and no wall can make you feel valuable. And no wall and no shell can let you connect with people in the future. And so survival is valid, but it's limiting. And I don't say I'm going to knock you all down. I never take away an old coping mechanism unless I help people find a better coping mechanism. And so when I accept people, guess what? They feel so safe that they can afford to be honest. And when I accept people, they don't have to get safety out of the secret. They can get safety out of sharing with me, knowing that I will respect their choice, because that's the foundation of me valuing them and accepting them and treating them as an equal person. Jesus called it treating people how you'd like to be treated. We live in a world that operates mainly on a power game, where when someone puts themselves up with power and puts someone else down with power, and that's called a perpetrator and a victim. And in our world, because power games are the dominant way that people relate to each other, some people actually become quite power dependent. And my experience is that people who don't accept themselves are very vulnerable to use other people, especially through power games, putting themselves up and putting other people down. And if we didn't regain our value to be able to treat each other as equal with respect, then some people actually become dependent on the power. And I've never met a power-dependent person who really accepted themselves. I never met a power person who could afford to let their shell down. And the most powerful people that I've ever met have usually got the biggest, thickest walls. And so the big bullies, guess what they are inside? They're scared. And the big bullies need big, tough shells. And they take steroids, and they take drugs, and they get aggro. And if they don't have power on their own, they join a collective, and that's called a gang. I don't have power on my own, so I'll get power out of a group. And if they need to put other people down to make themselves feel good, that's a sign to me that they're trying to get their needs met through power. And power can be like a shortcut. You feel good when you're on top. But it doesn't mean you can relax. Some of you might have heard the story of my patient Bart. Bart was a man who lived in Bogoroad jail. One day his friends hijacked the rubbish truck. And they hijacked the rubbish truck and drove out the rubbish truck through the double steel doors of Old Bogoroad. They exploded out of the jail. And McSweeney was actually shot by the guards and got a bullet in his arm, and I had to then, later when they recaptured him in Toowoomba, had to cut the bullet out of his arm. McSweeney later on made a pretend gun and hid it inside his body, so when they took him to the courts in George Street, he produced the gun, the fake gun, and used it to get the key off the guard. I don't know why the guard had the cell key and the door key on the same ring, but anyway, McSweeney escaped out of the court's holding cells in the Supreme Court in George Street, which is now being demolished. And he ran down Adelaide Street and hijacked the bus. And the guard chased him and shot him dead on the bus. That guard used the power of the system in doing his job and killed McSweeney. Sadly, that guard could never heal from that pain, and so that guard's now committed suicide. And so I've never seen somebody who's had to use power let it be an adequate source of value. McSweeney always wanted to die before he turned 30 because he had unresolved grief about his sister having died in a house fire. And so his unresolved grief meant that he had a what the heck attitude towards life, or I don't care about the consequences attitude towards life. And if we didn't value ourselves, then sometimes we could take risks and we could think, I'll just use power in whatever way I can and I won't care about whether I win or lose. And sometimes you'll find that when people don't value themselves, they might actually want to fight it out with the police, because some people believe that only weak people kill themselves. And so they're not even able to commit suicide because they think only weak people kill themselves. But equally, they'd be quite happy to fight it out with the police. And if the police shoot them dead, then they think, oh, I've died as a hero because I didn't kill myself, the police killed me. And so you'll see that interesting combination between a reliance on power and a denial mechanism where I deny a consequence, or I deny whether what I'm doing is working or not working, and I become so dependent on power and so dependent on denial that I even participate in an outcome that results in my death. Where's the gain in a belief system that means you end up dead? And so when I invite people to accept themselves and be honest, I'm actually helping them learn a different way than just being reliant on their power-dependent ways.
Just be careful of the cord.
Thank you. That's good. And so I call that old thing that I talked about suicide by cop, where if you didn't value yourself, you might participate in a power game. And so you might even hear on the news sometimes that people who don't feel valuable or who get stuck in addiction and they think, I'll never be able to get relief in my life other than addiction. And certainly one of my patients said to me one day, I'd much rather die than ever go back to jail. And sure enough, he was shot in the post office lane after having robbed the Bendigo Bank. And he robbed the Bendigo Bank to get the money to supply his heroin addiction. But rather than ever thinking about going back to jail, he'd be quite happy to have conflict with the police that resulted in him dying. And I don't explain these things to try and give people ideas about how to commit suicide. I talk about it because I want to understand what it is to be human. And the fact that if we don't feel valuable, we can all be vulnerable to power. And Bart was the guy that was friends of McSweeney, and Bart wasn't part of the escape plan, and Bart didn't escape, but Bart was angry because he was seen as the top dog in the prison system. And so the manager locked him up in the detention unit saying, we're in control here, and the management was outside the walls and I'm inside the walls. And so Bart's angry at the world, I'm the only visible sign of the world. And so Bart says to me, Wendell, wipe that smile off your face or I'll strangle you with my handcuffs. I hate interviewing people with handcuffs. I much prefer the guards take the handcuff off. There's more safety in me being equal than there is when there's a power differential. Anyway, I said to him, Bart, I'm not interested in being the winner or the loser here. I'm only interested in being the friend. So, you can be honest with me and I'll be honest with you. Next day when I went to visit him in the detention unit, he said to me, have a seat on the bed. Checking out, are you scared of me? Do you really mean what you say? Can I have power over you? Can I trust you? I'm happy any time to have a test of trust. I'm not interested any time to have a test of power. I would usually be the loser in the power game. And so I sat down next to him on his bed, responding to his invitation to be his equal, letting him be honest with me. And his honesty meant that he shared with me that he was angry because he didn't have any visits, he didn't have any exercise, and he was getting punished for what someone else had done. And I said to him, I really respect your honesty. I said, I don't have the power of being the general manager, but I'm comfortable being honest with you, and I'm comfortable being honest with the general manager, and whether it's the prisoner or the premier, I don't mind, I'll be honest with both. And so I worked with him to get some visits and to get him some resolution, and he could then let down his big tough shell and he could share with me that he felt failure as a dad and failure as a husband. And so he didn't need his big tough shell and he didn't need his power threats and he didn't need to threaten me to kill me anymore, because we got a new safety called respect. And certainly within my work within prison culture, ultimate safety comes from respect. It never comes from power. Within our relationship, he could cry in my presence because it was safe. He knew I wasn't going to betray him, I wasn't going to judge him. But separate to our relationship, he kept his power within prison culture, and they moved him to another prison, and the other guys there who didn't accept themselves joined together and joined a gang, and they got the weights into David Longman's prison and they bashed him to death in the gym, smashing his head in with the weights in the gym. And so I know from personal experience, from what I've seen with my own eyes, that power games is not the best way to get safety in your life. And power games, even if you're the winner, makes you the target. And so there's no safety whether you're the target or whether you're the doormat. And when people invite me to a power game, I say, oh, I'm not interested in being the winner or the loser. I don't want you to be the top or the bottom. I'm happy for you to be you, and I'm comfortable for me to be me. You can be honest with me and I'll be honest with you. And so I decline the invitation to the power game when people threaten to kill me, and I rename the game that I'm happy to play, the game of acceptance, honesty and trust, which for me are the ingredients of love. My favourite text in the whole Bible is 1 John 4 verse 18. Perfect love casts out fear. There's no fear in love. And we can spend our whole life fighting darkness. We could even be really busy sweeping the darkness out. How effective would we be? But if we bring love into the equation, what happens to the fear? It's just like light. When you bring light into a dark room, where does the darkness go? So fear is actually the absence of love, and darkness is the absence of light. And so now that I understand how healthy relationships work, I'm not interested in unhealthy. Because even if I spend my whole life doing unhealthy things, it doesn't work. And in a fear-based life, people do two things. They put up a fortress and they declare war. And so they get their safety out of their barrier and safety out of their power. It's the greatest insanity of all human history, is we think that power games and wars and fortresses and barriers can be the best way to have safety. The best way to have safety is to find ways to value each other, respect honesty in each other, even if it means respecting difference, so that then we can have respect for safety, and I call that dynamic safety. I actually call it portable safety. I can take my safety with me everywhere I go. With fortress safety, people get stuck in their big walls. And some people are so driven by fear that they can't leave their walls. And so they can't even go out of their house. Or they can't even go out of their church. I'm safe in the church, but I can't go outside it. I can't even listen to people outside of my safe zone. But when we take our safety with us, we can afford to listen. We don't have to agree. We don't have to say yes and yes. We can say yes and no. And so we can take our safety with us. And so here I get safety plus freedom. And here I get safety plus stuck and loss of freedom. Another way that some people seek safety, not just through power, is through prejudice. And so they love to put people in boxes. And they think if I put people in a box, then they're able to predict their behaviour. And when I can predict their behaviour, I'll be able to protect myself. And this is very common within prison culture. People want to look at people's history and then they want to predict their future because of their past. Well, how limiting is that? Who of us in the room wouldn't like to change our past if we could? Who of us in the room haven't gone down a few dead ends in our time? And if I accept myself, I can be honest and say, hey, this is a dead end and this is a through road. Let's put a sign on the corner saying dead end. It doesn't work, it doesn't deliver, it doesn't value me, it doesn't value other people. I might get power, but I hate myself. And so now we can start to see that life is about learning, not about just putting people in boxes, thinking we can prejudge them. And my experience with prejudice is usually the people who want to put other people down and prejudge other people are usually people who want to make themselves look good. And so the easiest example would be the TV evangelist who says, don't have sex outside of marriage, otherwise you're a bad person. Meanwhile, guess what he's doing? Hiding the fact that he's having sex with a secretary. And so people who rely on judgment and prejudice usually got unresolved issues around self-acceptance, where they don't value themselves and they get safety by putting other people down to make themselves look good. That's why God says, judge not that ye be not judged. That's why God says, owe no man anything but to love. And so, it's our job actually to love, not to judge. And when you think about it, we've got no capacity to judge, because only an all-knowing being would have that capacity to judge. Only someone who knows all the reasons, knows all the factors, has even got the right to judge. And when we start judging each other, we're actually usurping God's role. And we're putting ourselves up and putting other people down, which doesn't mean we're valuing ourselves or enjoying the value that God puts on us. And if you like the commandments, commandment number 1 says, don't have any other gods before me. And so when we judge other people, we're breaking commandment number 1. Putting ourselves up as God and putting other people down. I said before that the dominant world we live in is a power-based world where people put themselves up and put other people down. And so when people treat us badly, the first human automatic response is to think, oh, you treat me badly, now I'll justify treating you badly. My experience is when two people treat each other badly, it always gets worse. So look how inefficient we are collectively as a society, thinking that by treating people badly we're going to make the situation better. And that's actually called revenge. And David shared with you that he and I together cared for Australia's most hated man. And many people wanted revenge. They kicked him out of many houses. They put coffins on his doorstep. They wanted him dead. And they were angry, and they're probably angry for good reason, because they have unresolved issues of someone having treated them badly in the past. But if we go from having been treated badly to then justify treating someone else badly, we go from being a victim to becoming a perpetrator. And the very person they're wanting to kill had had that very life experience. He'd been a victim as a kid, which did not for a minute excuse any of his crimes. But I like to understand, not to excuse. And so whether I'm working with a victim or whether I'm working with a perpetrator, my main aim is I want that person to regain their value. Because guess what? Valuable people are free to value each other. My freedom not to put other people down doesn't not because I'm better than anybody else. It only comes as I could accept myself. And accept that my source of value comes from God, not from putting other people down. And if I can enjoy the value that God gives me, I don't need to judge. People who don't value themselves can't help themselves judging. And so when you feel attracted to judging, you say, hey, maybe God, I need to know you love me, so you can liberate me from my need to judge. And then we can be free to love and to owe no man anything but to love. And guess what? The more we love each other, the more we know God. The more we judge each other, the less we'd even want to know God. And so when people see the church as judgmental, do you think it's attractive? No way. What sort of marketing is it to have a judgmental church? No customers. Yeah. And so I'm a love pusher. The ingredients of love is to accept each other, to make it safe to be honest with each other. When we are honest, go back and confirm we accept each other, so we make it safe and have trust and respect and understanding. It doesn't mean we have to agree or have the same choices. And so for me, when I hear God saying, owe no man anything but to love, I say, nice word, what are the ingredients? And I believe that without any ingredients, there's no cake. So I'm not just interested in the cake, I'm interested in the ingredients, because then we get the cake. Over here we get revenge, over here we get resolution. I'll tell you one more story before we go to a break. My patient came to group. I run a rape recovery group. He was an old man. He was in his 70s. Anything older than me... anything older than me being 60 is old, okay? And he'd kept the lid on his secret for about 50 plus years. And in group he got relief by feeling safe enough to talk about what had happened to him. He was the son of a coal miner, and his dad was the president of the coal mining union. And the secretary of the coal mining union was seen as the good guy because he used to give out the food when everyone was on strike. And people liked him because it's nice to get food when you're on strike. But equally, that same man who had the good image abused the boy and abused his mate, taking them out into the bush and sexually abusing them. When that boy left town because Dad got a new job, the abuse stopped because he left town. He came back to town and his mate said to him, "Hey, the other kids in the village are taking this man to court. Will we join them?" And the boy said, "Oh, I don't think so, because my dad thinks this guy's a really good guy. He gave him a reference. So I don't think he'd believe me if I told him." And so if as parents, kids don't feel free to talk to you, then they get stuck in their secret. And so they didn't join the other kids. The man went to jail and did about 20 years of prison. When he got out of prison, they found him dead the next day in the bush. The day after finding him dead, they found a second man dead in the bush. And the bullets were the same. And so the victim had killed the perpetrator and got revenge. And revenge will get you your power back. But do you think getting your power back can get you your value back? No, it can't. And so he got his power back, but he didn't get his value back. And so when he'd killed somebody else and didn't feel valuable for what he'd done, he committed suicide at the same site as having murdered the man the day before. And so I've seen people get revenge, and I've seen people justify revenge, and our society is willing to justify revenge and elect politicians who get votes out of revenge. But it doesn't produce a safer society because it doesn't restore the value of anybody. That's why, whether I'm working with a victim or a perpetrator, I want both people to get their value back so valuable people can value themselves and each other. And as I value myself, I'm free to be honest about my limits and live inside them. If I don't value myself, I might deny my limits and go past them just like any perpetrator could. So part of Wendell's self-acceptance is to realise that Wendell could be in jail if Wendell didn't accept Wendell. And Wendell's acceptance isn't because he's better than, it's because he's free to, because God loves Wendell. In the rape group, this man said to the group, "Will I tell this man's mother why her son died?" And some people said, "Yes, you should tell her." And other people said, "No, you shouldn't tell her, she's too old." And guess what we decided to do? We decided to say, let's show the man's mother acceptance. Let's give her a choice. And say to her, "I have knowledge. If you want to know, I will tell you. If you don't want to know, I won't tell you." So the simplest way we can show we value each other is to listen and to give each other choice, because that's the foundation of safety. Safety is a nice word, love's a nice word, but unless it's got ingredients, they're just nice words. Thank you very much.
Nothing to say at this point. We had a bit of a session on nothing this morning. Because God works in nothing, you know. This is dynamic, powerful truth that sets us free. And you can see, I can see, the moment I met this guy, I just saw this freedom, and it's just so infectious that I can't stay away from it. It's like a magnet, you know. And it's really good stuff. So we're going to have a break now. We'll come back in